NASA is supposedly this benign government agency.
Right.
Nobody thinks of it as a defense agency.
Which it is.
Nobody thinks of it as classifying information for national security.
Which they do.
And it's right in their charter, as you pointed out. Okay. Do they have a particular schedule in mind about when they launch a mission? And if they do, is that in some way an emulation of these gods that guys like Hunter or Jack Parsons actually, as you probably know, the origin of NASA.
Right.
You got Jack Parsons as a occultist.
Right.
So why that? What are they doing? Do they launch a mission just any old place, any old way, or do they have specific occult ceremonies? And this is NASA. We're talking about a mainstream. This is what you got your New York Times bestseller for. Nobody's ever done a more definitive treatment of this than you have.
And Parsons was the head of JPL.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And, you know, there's things about NASA that just people in general don't know. I mean, Jack Parsons was one of the co-founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was founded on Halloween, 1936, and every year they put out what they call a nativity scene at JPL with Jack Parsons and Ed Foreman and a bunch of the other guys who founded JPL. And this is just part of this deeply embedded occult ritualistic stuff that goes on at NASA all the time. Now, we broke it down into, it was me and Richard C. Hoagland, and we broke it down into basically 3 secret societies that operate inside of NASA. One of them is what we call the Magicians, and they operated out of JPL. Jack Parsons was a follower of Aleister Crowley. He was his second in command for a while, and if you don't know who Aleister Crowley is, just look up Led Zeppelin on Wikipedia. And then inside there, they had a Nazi faction, which was led by people like Werner von Braun, and then the Freemasons, who, like Jim says, are not exactly a secret society because they're out there in public, but the very top level, the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite, specifically the temple in Washington, D.C., they did have an agenda. Most people don't know that Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason at the time, and that he took a Masonic apron with him, a ceremonial apron, and admits to performing a ceremony of some type. He called it a communion ceremony in the lunar module on the moon before he and Neil Armstrong went out and did their first moonwalk. Well, the truth is that communion ceremony actually traces its roots all the way back to ancient Egypt. It's an offering to an Egyptian god named Osiris. And if you look at all of NASA's heraldry and symbolism, it all relates back to ancient Egypt, the constellation of Orion, which represented Osiris. So you've got these guys performing these Masonic ceremonies on the lunar surface. Like, you know, you don't take a Masonic ceremonial apron with you to the moon unless you're going to perform a ceremony with it. So, you know, you begin to figure out, well, Apollo 11, it looks to me like what that was all about was actually consecrating the moon as a Masonic temple. That was the first job that they had. And then we went, of course, 5 more times after that and retrieved technology and did a lot of different stuff. But all of it was around this specific set of alignments of stellar objects, the belt stars of Orion, the heart of the lion, Regulus, the heart of Leo the lion of the constellation, and the star Sirius, which represented Isis. And we would find that it, you know, whenever they would launch or land or do something significant on the moon, especially in the Apollo days, that you'd have one of these key stars on the horizon, which was a big, powerful, important place for them in the ancient Egyptian stellar religion. Because primarily horizon, the word comes from Horus rising. Horus was the son of Isis and Osiris, who avenged his father, and you know, there's a million stories that are made up from that legend and myth. And we would find at 33 degrees, there would be, you know, the belt stars of Orion over the landing site. I think my favorite one was Apollo 16, where you had a lunar module named Orion, which is essentially named for the Egyptian god Osiris. It landed on April 20th, 1972, which is Adolf Hitler's birthday, and the belt stars were exactly 33 degrees above the landing site. Now, all of that is part of a mission plan. And how they used to plan these missions to the moon, and how they still do everything, is they said, okay, we got to pick a date and a time and a place that we're going to be on the moon. And, oh, how about how about Hitler's birthday with the belt stars 33, anyway. So they picked this particular spot, and then they planned backwards from that to get the launch window. So what we figured out is that NASA's been doing this over and over again, but I could never figure out, like, what's the deal? Is it just a religious ceremony to appease the gods? Also, one little thing that most people don't know, which is that the guy who basically picked all the Apollo landing sites was named Dr. Farouk El-Baz. He's still with us. He's Egyptian, believe it or not. He picked all the landing sites, and his father is a very prominent Egyptian scholar and politician, and he was an expert in the ancient Egyptian stellar religion, which worshipped the belt stars of Orion and as Osiris, and Sirius as Isis, and all these things. In other words, he had the complete perfect background to have done this and planned this. But the question always for me was, why? Why would you do this? What's the important aspect to it? And what it tells me is that this knowledge has passed down to us for at least since the Great Flood, at least since 12,800 years ago, or 12,800 BC, and all of this stuff is embedded and encoded in the pyramids and the mathematics of the various pyramids we found. I don't know about the Bosnian pyramids. I'm kind of unconvinced on those, because to me, I look at them and they're part of a mountain chain, and that always indicates to me it could be natural. But there's pyramids on Mars that are absolutely isolated. And how do you get a perfectly shaped pyramid on Mars all by itself? It's not part of a mountain chain. It has to be artificial. If you see that on Earth, it's guaranteed it's artificial. You don't even question it. So they have left us with all this knowledge, and it was imparted to the high priesthoods. That was Marduk's intention. He was the guy who took over at the end, because the stars said it was time for him to assume, control over the Earth in the last phase of the Anunnaki presence here. So Marduk moved his seat of power to Egypt. He went to a place that he named Cairo, which means Mars, which means Marduk. And he set himself up as Ra, the top god of the Egyptian pantheon. And his sons were Isis and Osiris and Seth, his sons and daughters, that NASA now worships. So he set these secret societies up with the intent that they would educate us, that they would civilize us, and that they would share things with us. But like tends to happen both in alien civilizations and in human civilizations, people realized that this inner knowledge was power, and they took that power and they usurped it, and they dropped the ball on their responsibility, which is to share with us our true destiny, our history, our future, our past, where we came from, why we're here, and what we're all about. And what we're all trying to do here, I think, not just on the panel, but every single one of us that's here, is we're trying to pull those veils back. Remember, that's what the word apocalypse means. It means to lift the veil. And when you lift the veil, you will create chaos, and you will create shifts, and you will create changes. So our job basically is to point the finger at these guys and tell them that the jig is up, and it's way, way past time that they shared with us everything that they've been holding secret for the last 2,000 years at least in order to control us.